You know, I should really start off one of these videos just by jumping straight in sometime. But alas, my ADHD storytelling brain will not be slain so easily, so not today. I want to quickly start off by explaining what the "Play a Real Shin Megami Tensei Game" subtitle is all about. You see, the only SMT games I've played are Personas 3, 4, 5, Q, Arena, Ultimax, and a little bit of SMT 4. And I've always wanted to play both the mainline and other spin-off games within the SMT series. Unfortunately, while I have bought most of them, I've always lacked the motivation to play them. I've always felt a bit overwhelmed by the more hardcore SMT experiences, due to worrying that they're more of a time sink than I'm willing to put in. So the "Play a Real SMT Game" is a statement to myself, and will be a series of reviews I'll be doing to help find that motivation to push through. One thing I'd like to clarify, however, is that Persona games are still SMT spin-offs and therefore are also real SMT games, which means Personas 1, both 2s, Q2, and 5 Scramble are still viable candidates. But I will be mixing things up so we don't get too much of one series all at once. One last thing I'd like to quickly mention before starting this is that I did play this on proper 3DS hardware, but I did need to use an emulator to record footage of the early game, and any other footage will be appropriately credited. Soul Hackers was originally released for the Sega Saturn in 1997 and was a non-direct sequel to its predecessor, SMT Devil Summoner, that came out 2 years prior. There were later ports to the PlayStation 1 in 1999 and eventually to the 3DS in 2012, which is the only version that's become available in English. Part of the reason why I picked up Soul Hackers to be the first game in this series was because it was actually the first SMT game I actually came across. Back when I was but a small boy, instead of studying for my A-levels, I would browse the 3DS shop, despite the fact that I had no actual way to buy anything from it, as at the time I did not have a credit card or in fact any form of income. Regardless, I would often look at all the things I couldn't have longingly, and something that would always grab my interest was Soul Hackers. Every time I saw the characters in the key art, I'd go, "Ooh, cool, is this some sort of JRPG?" And then I'd see first-person dungeons in the screenshots and go, "Oh right, yeah, it's this game." However, now that I'm older and wiser, I've grown to be more tolerant of first-person dungeon crawling, even if it would never be my first choice. But with this review project in mind, I couldn't think of a better place to start than the game that was technically my first contact with the series. Soul Hackers is about a young hacker group known as the Spookies that are active within Amami City, and how they accidentally stumble upon an evil plot from an unsavory group known as the Phantom Society. This is an organisation of demon summoners that are planning to steal and gather human souls using a newly developed internet system for the city known as Paradigm X, and it's up to our motley crew to stop them. The Spookies members consist of you, the protagonist, who, like most Atlas games, is silent and honestly even blanker than usual, as you probably get about 10 dialogue options the entire game. There's Hitomi, your childhood friend, where it's unclear whether she can actually hack things or not. Then there's Six, a gun nut, who talks a big game but is actually a huge coward, and despite the fact that the game describes him as easygoing, is constantly getting worked up throughout the game. We've got Lunch, who is a fairly reliable and chill guy, providing nothing involves his father. There's the youngest member of the group, Yuichi, who, well, he exists, I suppose. And finally, we have the leader of the Spookies, Spooky himself. Real name, Masahiro Sakurai. No, not that one, like the one who created Smash Bros. And Kirby. Yeah, there we go, that's the guy. Spooky is easily the best member of the crew. He's my dad, and I love him very dearly. He's also the one who created this sick-ass logo for the group, and I mean, look at it. We radiate the exact same energy. It's great. There is actually one more major character in the story, and that's the girl on the front of the box. This is Namisa, or rather, it's Namisa possessing Hitomi's body. You see, Namisa is a relatively kind-hearted, if a little too free-spirited demon who's lost her memories, but has some sort of tie to the Phantom Society as she was freed from their network before the beginning of the game, and was left inside a gun-shaped comp, a demon summoning device that the Spookies get a hold of. Namisa is the only other permanent party member other than the protag, and is easily the most important member of the cast, especially since you barely ever speak, so Namisa has to be the one to push the plot forward. Despite being a spin-off, Soul Hackers plays a lot like the older SMT titles, with the main differences being the overall theming and aesthetic switch from demon apocalypse in Tokyo to a 90s style cyberpunk setting, with the core gameplay having only a few minor changes and some unique mechanics added to it. Like Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2, the protag has no form of magic whatsoever, with his only combat options being his melee weapons, guns, and items. However, he is also the only party member who can initiate demon negotiations, as he is the only one who can use the game's gun-shaped comp, or as it's referred to a few times, a gump. Since this is the only way to acquire new demons without fusing two together, this makes him an incredibly vital piece of the party. In fact, he's so vital, if he dies or is turned to stone, then you're instantly booted out to the title screen, so keep in mind to save often. Nemissa, however, is a real powerhouse. She has 3 paths that she can go down, which is determined at the beginning of the game by how you describe Hitomi in an early dialogue prompt. No matter what answer you give, she'll still have both attack and support magic. Calling her upbeat will give her fire magic, while if you call her calm she will have more ice-based spells, and if you describe her as sexy then she will go down an electric-based path. Personally, I'd recommend going with the sexy electric build, because as a trade-off for not receiving any insta-kill spells, she instead receives some late game skills at slightly lower levels, as well as learning the second tier almighty magic, Megidola, while the other 2 routes only receive Megido. I do like this quite a bit, as it adds some personalization to each person's playthrough, as well as adding some replay value. Battles themselves are very simple. There's no press turn or once more system in place, as those weren't invented until SMT3. This means that exploiting enemy weaknesses is not a vital part of the core combat like it is in the modern games. You can have an active party with up to 6 members, fighting with 2 rows, one with 3 party members in the front and one with 3 in the back. The back row, as you probably expected, gets targeted less often, but will also deal and receive less physical damage as well. Also, only certain weapons and physical skills are able to attack or attack from the back row. Other than that, you have your usual elemental attack spells, as well as SMT's signature buff and debuff moves, but that's about the whole system. There is a mechanic similar to Biorhythm from the Fire Emblem games, where the strength of a demon will change depending on the phases of the moon, but honestly, I completely ignored it. One thing that might surprise people who've only played the newer games is that demons require a special resource known as Magicite to be summoned, and also have a cost for every step you take while they're active in the party. It's ultimately not that difficult to keep in check, but the Demon Compendium also requires Magicite to buy back demons that you've previously had. So if you want to get fusing specific stuff, or you don't want to recruit too many demons and just want to buy them back, then you best watch your resources. Another thing is that demons do not gain XP or level up as you progress through the game. That level 15 Jack Frost you've got isn't sticking around for too long, I'm afraid. When I first realised this, I didn't know how I was going to feel about it, but honestly, I didn't find it annoying at all. It encourages constant fusing and really makes you engage with the mechanic. I remember in Persona 3, I held onto a Neko Mada for ages, just because it had all 4 default elemental spells, and because it was cute. But eventually, I had to fuse her away as she was getting very underleveled. But in Soul Hackers, after each dungeon is complete, all those demons are going right back in the blender. Speaking of fusing, this is not done in a Cathedral of Shadows or in the Velvet Room in this game. It's done on a cruise ship called the Gomaden, and the fusion assistants in this game are, good lord, look at these two. Move over, Igor and Margaret, you're permanently retired. Now Victor and Mary are my best friends. As for demon negotiations in Soul Hackers, they're about as basic and standard as it gets. As ever, they're mostly luck-based, with you being able to take some sort of an educated guess into what they want. What I do like, however, is that there is a little smiley face next to the demon's name when selecting who you're going to talk to during a fight. This indicates that the demon is in a good mood due to the moon's phase, and when demons are in a good mood, you have a significantly higher chance of recruiting them. Otherwise, they might just decide to leave you alone or give you an item instead. Demons are also where 2 of Soul Hacker's unique mechanics come into play, and this takes form in the loyalty and alignment systems. See, the protagonist of Soul Hackers is arguably the weakest SMT protag lore-wise. He's not anyone particularly special, he's not a messiah, he's not a demi-fiend. He's just one random teenager who found a comp one day, and because of that, he doesn't have much control over the demons he uses. The demons and soul hackers have a loyalty meter that comes in levels 1 to 5, the default being level 3, and their loyalty will go up or down depending on a number of things. Firstly, every demon has a personality type, be it kind, wild, sly, etc., and each personality trait will determine how they react to your orders. Wild demons like doing physical attacks, while sly demons like using offensive or debuff spells. The two more aggravating personalities are dumb demons who like being told to do whatever they want, usually resulting in them being killed, and calm demons who like being told to do the thing that they were planning on doing anyway. Raising the loyalty of a demon is important, because how much they like you is what determines how often they'll actually listen to you in battle. And also, if a demon's loyalty gets low enough, they'll just straight up leave the party. Luckily, if you appease them for long enough and max out their loyalty, they'll always listen to you from that point onwards, and it's almost impossible for a demon's loyalty to go back down after it's been maxed out. And as an added bonus to this mechanic, for some reason, sly demons can be turned into powerful equipment if you get them to max loyalty. Then there's the other exclusive mechanic I mentioned, being the demon alignment system. Soul Hackers doesn't have various endings depending on whether you choose to be Law Scum, a Chaos Asshole, or a Neutral Coward, but the demons that you fuse together and recruit have alignments themselves, with the usual 3 alignments, but also with extreme versions of Law and Chaos added to the mix. This is something important to consider, since your party cannot have demons with clashing ideologies, with extreme law demons refusing to work with chaos or extreme chaos demons, and extreme chaos demons working the same but on the opposite end of the spectrum. This doesn't really end up affecting you too much, at least it never did for me, but if you find it annoying, there is an option to turn it off via the 3DS's exclusive hacks. These hacks are a godsend, by the way. They're just little things that you can turn on to modify the game ever so slightly to your liking. The first one is a difficulty hack, and is essentially just an easy and a hard mode, which I never really touched other than once or twice when I turned it down to easy to get more magicite when I was grinding. But the last two are extremely nice to have to reduce some of the frustration from Soul Hacker's more archaic elements. Firstly, there's the Analyze hack that gives you a full rundown of an enemy's attacks, weaknesses, and strengths. And when your protagonist dying means that you instantly get booted out to the title screen, this is a really nice thing to have so you don't accidentally kill yourself. The other hack, however, is the real MVP of the game, and that is the map hack, which will show you the entire map of each floor of a dungeon that you're exploring, with a few exceptions. See, why this is so good is because Soul Hacker's dungeons start off relatively basic, but as the game goes on, they do start to get a bit more complicated. This is good, as it makes the dungeons more interesting to navigate. However, at around about the halfway point, while they start to make dungeons more involved, they also end up making them more and more tedious in the process. I had the map hack on for the entire game, and the dungeons towards the back half of the game really started to push my patience. There are at least 2 dungeons in the game where a large part of it is fumbling around for invisible teleport tiles, when all but one of them take you back to the beginning of the dungeon. With the map hack active, you still don't know which teleport tile is the correct one, but you at least know where they are without having to step on all of them first. There is one dungeon, however, where even the map hack can't help reduce the tedium. See, in this dungeon there are 2 towers with about 8 floors on each, and you have to keep going back and forth between each tower multiple times. As first you need to unlock all the doors for each tower, and then afterwards you need to hit several switches that will raise a central platform between the 2. And after that you have to go and raise the central platform again, which results in another trip going from one tower to the other. So this is why I recommend using the map hack from the offset, because any and all tedium you can get rid of in the dungeons is very much welcome. Plus it probably shaves off about 5 to 10 hours of your playtime. There is actually one more thing that is unique to the gameplay of both Soul Hackers and the original Devil Summoner, and that is the introduction of a new race of artificial demon, known as a Zoma. Remember when I said that Nemissa was your only other permanent party member, and when I said that demons don't level up? Well, both of those statements are partially incorrect. Fairly early on in the story, Victor gives you a request to steal something known as a Dolly Cadmon from a man researching demons. This is technically optional, as you could beat the game without ever giving this to Victor, but realistically you will grab it and give it to him. By fusing the Dolly Cadmon with another demon, Victor is able to create an artificial one, which by default is called Zed. Zeed is great. He's this little alien man who's 100% loyal, he requires no magicite to summon or use, and he has no choice but to be your willing slave from now until forever. Zeed, however, is still a demon, and demons do not level up or learn new moves in this game. But by fusing Zeed with other demons, he is able to essentially absorb them instead, and this is how he gains new levels and moves that he will inherit. What's more is that he will evolve when he hits certain levels, and can go down different routes depending on what you fused into him. Basically, he's a Digimon with multiple Digivolution paths depending on how you raise him. I never really focused on what I gave him, I just kept him to a relatively close level to my protag to make sure he was never too weak. This ended up making him go down the human/angel path of evolution, which his final form has this aura that says, "Yeah, I'm into CBT, what are you gonna do about it?" Which honestly, I can't think of anything more threatening. Like, how do you fight someone like that? Soul Hackers' story is a bit of an odd thing to talk about. I don't mean that the story itself is weird, it's by no means complicated, and it's fairly enjoyable, but a lot of the time the pacing is really off. The best way of describing it would probably be that it's like a 13-episode anime series, but after making the storyboards for the season, they got told that they had to turn it into a feature-length movie instead. So they ended up having to chop it all up and then stitch it together into a shorter, cohesive piece. This results in a lot of gaps in the story, where it feels like several events or characters are never quite fleshed out at points, or they feel like the plot threads have been cut out entirely. The first hour or two of the game start off really well, with the protag and Hitomi by a terminal hacking into the city's network so he can cheat his name into winning a lottery for the Paradigm X beta test, before hearing a mysterious voice who goes by Keenap warning that perilous times wait ahead. After that, you scoot around here or there, establishing the protag's family and meeting up with Spooky, who explains that the Spooky's HQ has now been moved to a new location as he was being followed after acquiring a gun-shaped computer. As he steps out for a bit to gather more information, you decide to log on to Paradigm X to test it out, but upon trying to leave you are confronted by a demon who tries to steal your soul. Luckily, Keenap shows up in the form of a fox and saves you, and this is where he takes you into something known as a vision quest to help try and explain to you what's going on. Vision quests are essentially these fairly short vignettes of different devil summoners' final moments before their deaths. In this first one, you witness the final moments of a man called Arabe, an ex-member of the Phantom Society, and the original owner of the Gump that Spooky found. In this short episode, Arabe sneaks into one of the Phantom Society's bases of operations, Algonsoft, and acquires a program called Nemissa, as he isn't sure what it is exactly, but he does know that it's important to the society. After being caught by the game's pseudo-rival Finnegan, however, he realizes he won't be able to escape, so in one last attempt, he throws his Gump off of the roof of the building, hoping it will somehow make its way into safe hands. After having this vision, the protag comes out of a coma-like state and instantly tries the passcode that he saw Arabe use to lock the Gump, and it works. This activates the device and in turn releases Nemissa, who with no physical form possesses Hitomi. She's by no means a hostile demon and actually thanks the two for freeing her, but she's also not very considerate as she has no problems with just taking Hitomi's body and treating it like her own now. Before she can leave with our friend and cause havoc, the other Spookies, Lunch and Six, show up and are introduced briefly before their leader calls to say that he's in trouble. Turns out that Spooky went back to where the Gump was found to investigate, and is now trapped in the same building Arabe was killed in, but this time it's overrun with demons. So the whole squad dashes in to save him, including Nemissa, who just tags along for fun. Now this setup is pretty good, but as I mentioned, this is only the first hour or so, and if they kept the story going at a pace like this, it might actually go somewhere. But unfortunately, after clearing this dungeon, for a lot of the early game, not an awful lot happens. You just hop from place to place, either dealing with areas with demon breakouts, or saving people who have had their soul taken via Paradigm X, and this is what the next 10, 15, maybe 20 hours of the game consists of. Another thing I found quite disappointing were the vision quests. They seem like these cool glimpses you'd get of the shady underbelly of Soul Hacker's world, but ultimately there's only 3 of them in the game and they're all rather short too. Between the main story and these vision quests, you do get some very small teasers of some cool world building going on, as you'll encounter characters like Reiho and Kyoji from the previous Devil Summoner game running around and doing shit. but you never actually find out what that is. For now, I'll just pretend they're off doing season 2 of the live-action Devil Summoner series. I don't want to sound all negative though. What I do like about Soul Hackers' story is it handles the aesthetic really well. The whole thing has this slightly campy, close 90s future cyberpunk feel to it. It has a very different tone to the mainline SMT games and modern personas, that's for sure. And I definitely get a kick out of the game's silly campiness too. Like, a computer in the shape of a gun that summons demons is pretty fucking stupid. But you know what's dumber? A computer in the shape of a saxophone that summons demons. I'm not lying, this is in the game, I swear. Soul Hackers is not a terribly long game, clocking in at around about 35 hours, and also, unlike a lot of SMT games, only has one ending. Well, technically it has a second, only obtainable in New Game Plus, but it really only changes a very small aspect of the story. The requirement to unlock New Game Plus, however, is surprisingly not beating the game. Throughout the game, there is a building that you can visit called the Sea Arc Hotel that you can slowly progress up depending on what your level is. There's not really a lot here, it's just a place that you can go to grind if you want a wide array of demons to recruit, or if you feel like the next place you're supposed to go to is a bit too much for your current level or party. But upon beating the game, you actually unlock the hotel's top floor. This allows you to enter the game's post-game dungeon called the Corridor of Time. Since you'll likely finish the game at around about level 60-ish, this final dungeon is an excuse to use the rest of the level 99 level cap, since there's still more skills for Nemessa to learn and new demons to fuse. The Corridor of Time is split up into multiple sub-dungeons that all give you a key upon beating their respective bosses. Once gathering all of these keys, you can unlock the door to the true final boss of the game, Beelzebub, and you will unlock New Game Plus by defeating him. Your second playthrough doesn't do all that much. Enemies will do 50% more damage, and a few things carry over, like the Demon Compendium, as well as your casino coins, etc. And you also get the ability to acquire demons beyond your level this time, letting you break the game. And the most notable thing being the altered ending that I mentioned before. There is, however, actually one more final bit of content that Soul Hackers will throw at you. When the original PS1 port was released in Japan, one of its incentives was an extra dungeon to be played in the post-game, which was aptly named Extra Dungeon. This was also made available on the original Sega Saturn version by the release of a completely separate disc which you could transfer a clear game save file over to. The Extra Dungeon is essentially the Corridor of Time 2.0. It's got a very similar structure, with having multiple sub-dungeons that you need to complete to unlock a door to the final boss. It's one final challenge to really test your mettle, but also there's quite a bit of fan service in here as well. However, most of it's really only for Japanese fans, as it's all related to the original Devil Summoner. Firstly, Sid, the main villain of the previous game, is the boss of one of the sub-dungeons, and will face you off whilst copying your demons. And after that, the final boss you have to fight is Kyoji Kuzunoha, or rather, the soul of the Devil Summoner protagonist in his body, and he will use some of the series' strongest demons to fight you in one last confrontation. At least, that's how it was in the PS1 version. However, one of the few additions to the 3DS port of the game is that this boss is actually followed up with a few more. Since the two Raido Kuzunoha games came out between the original release and the 3DS port, Atlus saw it fit to add some fan service in here for the Raido games as well, since they are technically part of the Devil Summoner series despite looking and feeling very different. So you actually cap off the game with fights against Raido and... Raido? We'll call him Raidu. I think he's a different character judging by the wiki, but I'm not sure. And then finally you fight this giant mecha thing, which is probably a spoiler, but I don't know. And with that, you'll have covered all of Soul Hackers. There is one more thing that I couldn't think of anywhere to fit, but the 3DS version also features an obligatory Street Pass and Play Coin feature. There's an option in the menu to access this little creature called a Nemechi. By feeding it Play Coins, it lets you evolve it, which expands its catalogue of exclusive demons. You can then spend even more Play Coins to be able to buy these demons without having to recruit them. It is something that you don't really need to pay attention to, but it's nice that it's there if you don't want to have to go through the hassle of negotiating and recruiting demons to your party. And honestly, what are you going to spend Play Coins on these days? I know that I've made out that I've got a lot of gripes with Soul Hackers, but I did genuinely really enjoy my time with it. It's definitely not the most interesting of JRPGs, and I really can't see myself ever going back to it. And I definitely think the port to the 3DS is probably the last we'll ever see of it too. Unless some sort of miracle happens, like all of the planets aligning, zapping Atlas with weird cosmic rays causing them to make PC ports of all of their old games, and giving Haru the goddamn screen time she deserves. But honestly, if the 3DS is this game's final resting place, then that's fine. There are other games and ports that probably deserve the attention first, and honestly, I'd probably recommend other SMT games over this. But if you are a Shin Megami Tensei fan and you still haven't gotten around to this game, then I'd give it a chance. It probably wasn't the best choice of game to start off this SMT journey of mine due to its archaic nature and all, but on the bright side there's a whole bunch of newer and more interesting games to cover on the PS2 and 3DS, so it's all very much uphill from here. Speaking of the next games I'll cover, since we have Nocturne HD, SMT5 and Persona 5 Strikers all coming out in the first half of next year, those will definitely be my focus while they're in the gaming zeitgeist, so keep an eye out for those. After that, I'm not sure, but Raido Kuzunoa and Digital Devil Saga are definitely giving me seductive looks from across the bar, so it's probably going to be one of those two. Well, that's another video down. I'm really glad that I've managed to start this Play a Real Shin Megami Tensei game series, because it's definitely something that I've wanted to do for a while. They've all been sitting there waiting for me to go and play them, but I've just never gotten around to doing it. I think it's very unlikely that I'll be doing multiple in a row, because I do not want to give myself burnout. But I'll probably do like one SMT related video every 3 or 4 months or so. So if that interests you, by all means, stick around. I've kind of said this from the beginning, but I really need to work on shortening my scripts a little bit, just cutting the fat out in general. So I'll be doing my absolute best to, even if I don't shorten my videos, at least fill them with more meaningful content. The next video I'm going to be doing for January will be a quick look at various games, opposed to one big detailed review on one. As I've mentioned before, I still don't really know what I'm doing in a number of ways, and I just want to experiment on things and see how these videos turn out in general. And as ever, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you did, and comment down below. I really enjoyed seeing feedback, because it means that I can get better at doing this, and that's definitely something I want to do. So yeah, thanks.